Highly infectious virus that has cold, flu-like symptoms. But much worse, this virus can cause you to die. The main symptoms of coronavirus, COVID-19, are a high temperature, a new continuous cough, and a loss or change to your sense of smell or taste. COVID-19 came to light back in 2019, which caused a lot of issues. On the 23rd of March 2020, the UK went into a full lockdown, where the government set out strict guidelines that had a big impact on the education system. After the sudden lockdown measures were introduced, the whole of the education system went online, and this caused a whole load of issues where students and teachers were struggling to attend lessons because of issues with the internet, or students were delayed on receiving equipment. Students struggled to gain access to lessons or felt that they could not concentrate, and that they felt that they were missing out on vital lessons like maths, English, music and science. Although some students were able to access lessons even then, students felt that they were not supported and that they were missing out on socialising activities.
Martin Bannon. I teach graphic design here, and I've been doing it for about 12 years. I think I had an advantage because I'd already been teaching a Japanese student remotely in Kyoto online for a few months before that, expecting her to join the course in the spring after Christmas. So I'd already had practice in setting up the technology, sorting out the interaction and what software I was going to use.
My full name is Frank Edward Grover, and I am currently studying media at college. Getting back into lockdown, it took a bit of adjusting, mostly sleep patterns, but going back to more of the same, so it wasn't too difficult.
I'm Demetrius. I'm in Year 10 at Harrow Community School in Hampshire. I'm currently studying French, history, photography and triple science at GCSE. I mean, online learning in its fact was such an interesting kind of experience. It wasn't. I mean, I believe that actually it has, whilst it's made me a kind of more independent in terms that I was able to manage my own learning, in terms of that I was able to create a schedule in which I was able to carry out my learning. But obviously it has been a challenge, digital challenges, and actually getting that interaction that you would get into a normal classroom just was no longer present as an option for young people. So that's one of the things.
After the past few years, students have developed a lot of anxiety due to being in lockdown and then returning back to education after lockdown has put so much pressures on both students and teachers.
I think the ones that had done it before had an advantage if they'd done it at school, because one of the most difficult things was one of the simplest things you'd ignore, which was just turn taking. Everybody's on the screen at once, they're all talking at once. We had to work out a way of me giving a question and them interacting without all coming in at once. So we gradually established a way of doing that. I think it's unfair to mark students more leniently, and overall we've seen grade inflation. So we've got the definite feel that we've got students on our level 3 course who struggle with the academic side of the course. They want to rush straight onto their technical projects, and they're not prepared to put in the research, to put in the planning, to show how they got from their first ideas to their final ideas, and explain all the steps involved. They're not used to doing that. Another thing, they should have developed their independent study skills through lockdown, but a lot of them didn't do that. They really needed the support within.
How I dealt in lockdown. I mean, I enjoy being alone, so it wasn't that hard. Though physical health, I definitely got a bit lazy. I've got a lot slower, but overall I was probably one of the better ones in lockdown.
It comes in borderline cases where a student has struggled with research but technically they're very, very excellent, they're very talented. So there you need to support them to do the academic work. I've had classes with 3 or 4 students that really needed one-to-one support within the room, and you can give it, but in an hour-and-a-half lesson, there's not enough time to cover everybody. So you have to be fairly ruthless with your time and hope that a small instruction will help someone progress. But obviously with some students, as soon as you walk away, they start slipping with their independent study, that they need being guided.
You could have done differently. It's a bit, yeah, as I said, there was a lot of people like me who just, because of lockdown, basically took the year off, and it was very much just, the adjustment period was hard because it was just kind of like, all right, you're doing nothing pretty much, all right, back into it, back like we never left. It was like not an easy adjustment to make. I think even before like quarantine came in, I always have thought that the current education system is very outdated. Like it goes off, students have to learn a bunch of things that 90% of which they won't remember, because who remembers a lot of children, they just won't be interested in specific dates of when certain kings got assassinated, because it's just boring. And then by the time they're 16, they go from having basically having no choice and not being interested in anything, to immediately having to choose what it feels like having to choose the rest of what they're doing for the rest of their lives. Even though you can change, it's just like, I don't know. There's a lot of things that are wrong with the education system, but a lot of irrelevant information being taught. But yeah.
I've had classes with 3 or 4 students that really needed one-to-one support within the room, and you can give it, but in an hour-and-a-half lesson, there's not enough time to cover everybody. So you have to be fairly ruthless with your time and hope that a small instruction will help someone progress. But obviously with some students, as soon as you walk away, they start slipping with their independent study, that they need being guided through things.
Just eager, sorry. I think it was a good thing about lockdown was that sense of me being able to become much more independent in managing my own learning. Lockdown 1 was very much different to lockdown 3. I think lockdown 1 was that actually school sent lots of worksheets and lots of documents and whatnot to look over, and it wasn't as, you have to do this. It was like, do it or not. But actually I did do it, and I did still do it, and what could have been a 6-hour day actually turned into a 2-hour day with all of the worksheet that was presented, and then I had the rest of the day to do whatever. As Bethan mentioned, I'm a serving MYP, that allowed me and presented me with so many different opportunities to do more meetings, to talk to an audience of like you. It allowed me and gave me lots of different opportunities to work on different projects and whatnot. So actually, yeah, that was a good thing about lockdown. The bad thing about lockdown, I think for a lot of people would agree with me, it's that human contact. It's that human, it is all of that interaction that actually a lot of people do crave, and we took for granted before the coronavirus was even a thing. It was something that actually you would be able to turn around to your partner to talk to them, to like, oh my God, I don't actually get this whatsoever, or you'd be able to do it vice versa. That was no longer as easy as it would be in a normal classroom. So just the pandemic as a result has actually impacted young people in so many different ways. And yeah, I know of people that have actually really struggled, really struggled, and they found it really difficult to manage online learning. They found it really difficult to maintain existing relationships and friendships, because of that kind of situation that young people have been put in, and everyone has been put in fact. It has just been, some young people unfortunately have suffered really badly with mental health. They've started to gain issues because of the lack of contact, because of maybe existing anxiety, which is unfortunately worsened over lockdown. So actually, yes, there have been. Yeah.
My name's Alicia, I'm 18. I'm also in year 13. I'm at the Anglo-European in Essex. I study global politics, economics, finance, and PE. I mean, I've had exams this week, and then I also had them in September when we first came back. And I look back and I think if I probably was in school the whole time and we weren't schools didn't get shut, I think those exams probably would have gotten a lot better, and my predicted grades that went off to unis and stuff like that would probably be substantially quite a bit higher. I think it does come back down to the way the schools have done it and how schools have dealt with it. Those schools that did online learning well from the first lockdown and in the second one, I think their students won't have as much of a difference in progress. But I know for my sixth form, where we didn't do online lessons until January, there's quite a bit of a gap between those who have done well and those who haven't.
I would not. I couldn't stress it enough. But I think making young people, if you will, to do these after school sessions or doing these catch ups to further take up more time than they already are, the 6 hour school day, sometimes even more. I think that would be more detrimental to young people's mental health than it will be to young people's learning. I think schools and the government need to understand that actually young people's mental health should absolutely come before school learning. Obviously, it's really, really, really important that you do understand all of your learning and the curriculum is still taught. It is, I think, much more important that young people do have a good well-being, that they are still healthy, that they are mentally and physically healthy before that kind of conversation begins. I think young people's mental health during lockdown has worsened. I'm sure there will be studies to prove that of young people, but I think it would be much more beneficial to look at how young people's mental health can be further improved rather than mainly focusing on catching up immediately.
I mean, this is kind of because I'm in year 13, so some of it in terms of catch up isn't really useful in a sense. But I mean, my sixth form, we've been doing after school lessons. They're optional, but in terms of to help us with the exams that we're sitting this week and after Easter, we've been doing after school lessons and kind of putting in extra lessons where we can to try and ensure that we've covered as much content as possible to be prepared for the mini exams. I myself, obviously being a young carer, in secondary school, I wasn't able to stay after school a lot of the time. And I know there's a lot of other young people for other sorts of reasons that can't stay after school. And sometimes, yes, okay, it will help ensure that there is not so much of a bridge of a gap, but having those after school lessons can make that bridge of a gap bigger for those who can't attend for different reasons.
Last question, coming back to school, I think mainly I was very, very excited. I think it was that excitement of getting back to normality, having that sense of normality again, just to be in the classroom, to actually see your friends in person rather than on a group chat or on a video call. I think that was really, really beneficial because it does again, it's that sense of belonging, it's that sense of normality, and that's what has been missing during the pandemic. It's not as easy to meet up with multiple friends, of course, because of you only now obviously for recreational purposes you're allowed to meet one other person, but it is something that has been missing, and school actually does allow that to happen. Whilst I was really excited, I was quite nervous. It's now that we as secondary school pupils came back needing to wear masks inside. Thankfully, I don't need to because I'm in an office in a confined space all by myself. I do find that actually, okay, right, masks every single time unless you're outside. But actually, nothing more has changed since we came back from the last lockdown. Still hand sanitizing, still ensuring that you're keeping a distance. But school has been absolutely the same, and school has really ensured that young people, that the pupils are feeling that they're okay. So, for example, my own tutor, at the first day back, we wrote a letter to our tutor just to say, okay, so this is how my lockdown went. And they went through and actually spoke to every single tutee to catch them up and see, okay, how are you doing? And that's what's really, really important, that schools need to be prioritizing to make sure that young people are feeling well and that they are looking forward
to you guys, because obviously you guys aren't the spokespeople, but I know a big thing that's kind of been a thing for year 11s and year 13s was obviously in the beginning of January, when we were all officially told by Gavin Williamson that exams were cancelled and there was going to be no exams whatsoever. Why is it that now, I know me and Bethan can relate, that we're sitting even more exams than we were originally, but those papers have been brought months in advance? I was meant to sit my econ paper in I think 2 months time, but I sat it on Monday. And it's not really kind of a why kind of was we originally told it was cancelled when in fact that it isn't cancelled?
Well,
effectively what's happened is that the system that then came about was that we now as teachers need to provide more evidence to be able to justify the grade that they're giving you. And so therefore what's happened is that it's been agreed that schools can, if they wish to, have you sit papers, past papers or whatever in order to gather evidence that they can then use against your other work throughout the last 2 years. And so, as you correctly say, that means lots of teachers that are maybe planning mock exams or doing course content that covers the whole course that you maybe not been able to access, and now suddenly having to do this in a very short window frame. I think it's the 18th of June is the date that sticks in my head as to when schools have to send all this data analysis off to exam boards for approval. And because they've not necessarily had the guidance from exam boards quick enough, as you rightly pointed out, about which exam papers are and are not acceptable, how can assessment work for each different subject and each different exam board, it's meant the teachers fairly have effectively panicked and basically tried to do as much as they can to build up the evidence base to make sure the grade that you were destined to get, I'm sure, if you'd sat the exams, is given to you rather than having to go through some lengthy appeal process. So ultimately, that's what has come about, which is why I was annoyed that that system had been created. And personally, I think as a committee, you'll find that we were all saying actually, and we're so glad that students, you said that you wanted exams, because our question to the minister was, should exams gone ahead? And he was trying to tell us, oh, well, the 54% said that they didn't want to do mandatory exam papers. And, you know, I feel that, 54% was not enough to really quantify as the overwhelming majority of young people, as well as teachers, who actually were in majority favour of you doing exams in order to justify your grade. So that's where that system's gone wrong.
Mine's kind of more of an opinion question, because I think I'd just be interested, and I'm sure the rest of us would be interested to hear everyone's thoughts of where you think that the gap in learning will even up. Like that I know I can sit here now as a year 13 and say that I've lost education, but when will we stop giving concessions? When do we think that the year groups will get to what they were before COVID? So for example, I can speak here now and say I've lost learning, but also Demetrius's year have lost a horrendous amount of learning and are still taking exams next year, most likely.
Thanks very much. But the answer is that we don't know, Bethan. It's a really good question. When on earth will the impact of this stop being felt? I've got a son in year 9 as well, so I can see that the impact is coming down the years, then year 8. I mean, everyone who's lost learning all the way through the years. So it will be a very long time, and it will have to be something that the government has to look at for a long time. And that's part of our role in the committee, to say, don't think this is all done in a year's time. There's going to be an impact of this in the many, many ways that you've talked about in this meeting, that it will be felt and the impact will be have. And it's a disproportionate impact on some more than others, as you've been saying as well. And it's something we really have to keep looking at. So it's a really good question, but we don't know the answer. It's a long time.
Hello, thank you. Basically, with my youth activist hat on, so I think obviously this opportunity has been absolutely amazing for me to actually be able to voice young people's, opinions and voices and whatnot. But what will you as a committee further from this do to ensure young people's voices are heard and they are reflected and within government and all of its policies and guidances that they do create? How is that going to be reflected? So that's my main question.
I am quite worried kind of what my future has to hold, because forever I am going to be known as the generation of COVID, and being a student that never properly did the exams, our results will never be seen as kind of the same, and I think it's something that will affect us for a very long time.
The uncertainty, I think, is definitely a huge issue. I mean, also that I am going to university this year, hopefully, if I get the grades, but also that the unis themselves haven't been able to support us that much within the process. So my uni wants A-star AA. They only take, I think, 10% of applicants for the course that I got into. It is extremely competitive. And so there is a lot of stress on, will I be able to get the final grades? And if I don't, what's the leeway with it, because we have not been told if there's any kind of way that we could still get in under a slightly lower grade than was anticipated. And I think it's a bit weird, but also that they haven't changed any of their grade flexibility, even despite the amount of disruptance because that the pandemic has caused. And then also on the other point of apprenticeships for I want to do international relations and German at uni. So there aren't particularly apprenticeships there, but so that wasn't really a proper issue for me. But I know that my brother is in year 11 and he's applying for apprenticeships, and that's been really difficult because also interviews have been like on a call or have all been online, which aren't the same as being in person. And then also I've missed out on opportunities to do work experience and to develop my CV that way. I was supposed to be going to Germany and I was going to do political work experience last year, which I've also missed out on. So there is a lot of uncertainty. And as Alicia said, like, I also worry that my grades will never be good enough. Like, they might look nice on paper, but actually will people just kind of brush them by because
the system was working before they changed it. They need to revert to some of the things that were working well. The change in the way it's funded, the funded, at a local level rather than at a government level, that needs sorting out to put more money in the system. When I was this age in the late 60s, everything seemed to work fine. There was plenty of time, plenty of money in schools for lessons. I got free university education. I came from a poor family, so I got all my living expenses, all my lecture fees paid. Got a bursary, not very much. You had to work in the holidays. But I didn't have to work at weekends to support myself.
Most students have been affected and that they urge the education and examinations.